Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Johnny, and today I really am excited to introduce to you one of my dearest friends for 30 years. This is the clean food chef, Jeannette Bessinger. Jeanette and I have done 5 cookbooks together. She is a true healer. She did the recipes for the, Jeanette? The healthiest meals on earth, the healthiest 15-minute recipes on earth, the slow cook.
Comfort foods, longevity foods.
1 million of them. And we write a column together for Better Nutrition, the Healthiest Foods column. And I am just so delighted to have you here today to talk about holiday eating in general, how to do damage control, how to maybe health up some of our traditional recipes, and some of the things we can do just psychologically, maybe to not succumb to, the whole eating orgy that we all go through in December and then we regret in January. What can we do to just kind of break out some of that stuff?
I know that it's just a huge challenge, and it really starts at Halloween. I mean, let's be honest, it's like a 3-month binge. And for me, I mean, I think a lot of times what happens with people is when we kind of move into the holidays and we shift gears and we get into that space, it's almost like it breaks the seal on our healthy eating, and then all bets are off. Like that's really when it gets problematic, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, I'm going to have a little of this. Well, I'm eating gluten now, so I'm going to start stacking, and I'll have the rolls tonight, and I'll have Aunt pie. And really, it's that mentality is what's problematic.
How did you get into my head and actually say the thoughts that I've had and everyone?
Right? I mean, that's what happened. And so anything that can kind of interrupt that interruption in a way. So for me, it's like really normalizing your daily routines and normalizing your basic food so that when you really eat something, when you have a holiday, if there's a celebration or party or something like that, it really is something special. It doesn't mean that the next day you have to eat the leftovers and then, add a big starchy thing to lunch and then have a few cocktails, at home for dinner that night. That's typically when people get into trouble, because really the actual celebration days, I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't go to thousands of cocktail parties. I'll go to a few, right? A few parties, and there's one big day, and maybe, Christmas Eve or Hanukkah, it's a little different, but there's really just a couple select days. So if we think about keeping the routine, staying with, staying with the exercise, staying super hydrated. For me, having some kind of green drink in the morning, or at least water with lemon, it just helps. It flushes my system. It rinses out extra salt that I might be carrying. I just feel better. And even adding chlorophyll, doesn't have to be a green juice, but just adding a little bit of chlorophyll, you can find a minty one, to a big glass of water first thing in the morning. For me, it actually helps cut those sugar cravings. So I don't get into that groove where I kind of keep repeating doing that.
I found the green drinks are very good for that. I've written about that a lot. I use, for example, Barlean's greens, but there's a lot of great greens. Drew Canoli's got a wonderful one that we featured on the website last week. And what I find with those is that they're really the best diet drink in a way, because they are very low glycemic and they don't stimulate your appetite, yet they fill you up a little bit. So they're kind of like a very natural weight control device. I think green drinks it's probably a great idea to have them around, especially during the holidays. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree. And I think even for me, it actually cuts my sugar cravings. And so if I know that I'm going to, if I've got a party or there's something going on after work, I'll have one 3 or 4 o'clock, and just throw it into water, take it with me in a little shaky container. And then it calms me down. It settles my energy. And just even in that afternoon slump, it just, gives me a little pickup. And I feel like I behave better.
Sure. Now, what about, you had mentioned this before when you said, you used a great expression, as you always do, breaking the seal of our, I think that a lot of us have that sense that once you've kind of slipped, if you will, or you've kind of gone off the reservation when it comes to your diet, that the whole day is shot. You'll start again tomorrow, and then tomorrow becomes next week. Talk to us a little bit about this notion that maybe each bite is a new decision, and you don't really have to wait till the next day to start again, and you might just begin with the next meal or even the next bite. How do we incorporate that kind of thinking into holiday eating?
I love it. I love it that you're saying it that way, because really ultimately, and this sort of begins to tap into the stress, holiday stress issues. If we really just come present, we come present to every moment, then everything, it's really a matter of conscious eating. Everything tends to slow down. We tend to tune in. And what can happen is I think about it as, holiday head. And, I start spinning out, and it's all fun, or it's all stress, and if you can kind of come back into your body and just feel your body, feel your sense of self, your groundedness. I mean, literally, if you're sitting in a chair with a group of people at a table, literally feel your sits bones, feel your feet on the ground, feel your breath going into your low belly, and then just notice that you're actually sitting here. And that'll help you slow down a little bit, and then just take one bite and really taste it and enjoy it. So I would say kind of becoming conscious of your body, tuning into your breath, really slowing down. Classic thing, putting your fork down, having a sip of water, and just doing that. If you can actually do that when you're enjoying your treats, when you're sipping a cocktail, and then when you're back to your healthier eating, it's going to be that much easier to say, okay, I'm not, on a jag here. It's a way of interrupting, because those are unconscious. The binging kind of stuff, we go to sleep a little bit. We go into a certain frame of mind, and we tune out. We go on autopilot, and it's not a healthy autopilot. So if you can pull yourself out of that all the time, not just when you're eating sweet stuff, but all the time for your daily meals, it's going to be much easier to say, okay, right now I actually have an opportunity to bring some balance back into my eating. And of course, your choices are really important. You got to get protein, at every meal when you're eating starches and sugars. You really do. You need that fiber, fat, the time release foods. Mm-hmm. And actually, for me, vegetables and green vegetables in particular have been really, really helpful. Just loading up my plate to kind of crowd out, so I really feel satisfied for most of the day. Mm-hmm. So if I have something, it's just balance. If I have something big and rich, then the next meal I have might be a little bit lower volume density, like a soup, and it's going to be loaded with vegetables. I'm going to breathe, chew. Yeah.
You mentioned the soup, and it just triggered a thought that I had about ways that we can actually kind of do natural appetite control. And I remember some research that was done. I think I wrote about this week. Barbara Rolls at Penn State did some research finding that if people eat a small green salad or a small bowl of soup prior to the meal, they spontaneously, without even trying, consume about 12% less calories. What do you think about those kinds of hints to holiday eating?
Well, that's a perfect one. And also having some protein, if you're going to have cocktails, definitely having a little bit of cheese, or if there's some kind of, deli meat, some sort of offering like that that's around, have that first, because that's going to, slow down it'll, settle your stomach a little bit, but it'll also slow down the sugar rush, and it'll slow down the alcohol effect. And so you'll be able to eat or drink less. Chewing is another big one. Just chewing each bite several times, so that your body gets it that you're eating something, so that then your satiety signal will kick in. When it kicks in, you're actually going to notice it. And I think in terms of making selections, if you're going to a party, bring something that has high volume, low calorie density, high fiber, that's vegetable based, that's not as sweet. So there's going to be an offering there that you can spend a little time focusing on that, instead of, all the other super rich stuff that's there.
One of the things I tell people, because I used to do this myself, and I know a lot of people do, when they know they're going to go to a big banquet, they want to come hungry, right? So they don't eat all day. Probably the worst idea you could possibly do. Would you agree?
Never skip a meal. And you want to eat regularly, really. You want to eat regularly, and eat at regular intervals as well. So make sure that you have breakfast on that day, because that affects your appetite later in the evening even. And then make sure that you have a good lunch with a solid protein in it. And actually, your appetite can get thrown off, especially if you're a little bit sensitive or reactive to some of these foods. You have a little gluten or sugar, then you can have this sort of false appetite for the next day. It helps me to make sure that I'm eating every 3 hours. If my appetite starts to go haywire, or if I really want to keep it level and measured on a holiday, I will eat by the clock, 15 minutes, give or take, but really eating at measured intervals like that will kind of reset it. It won't allow that really ravenous hunger to kick in if you do that. So, but for sure, get all the calories you need and that green drink before your big holiday night.
What do you think about the choices that we're given when I go to a Thanksgiving dinner or any one of these banquets? There are just so many things. It's like a Vegas buffet, and I found that having that many choices is actually counterproductive if you're trying to control, the total amount of food that you eat that day. What do you think are there any tricks you can give us that might address how people can maybe choose what they're going to do and just put it on the plate and then say no to the other things? I mean, I'm not saying to not eat any of them, but I'm saying maybe you don't have to sample every single food, because what do you think about that?
Well, for me, you know, and I have an overeating issue that's just all my life. I can switch into that mode really easily. It's tremendously important. It comes back to that consciousness thing, but to plan, to literally spend 5 minutes before I'm going to this event and just think to myself, just take a second and think to myself, okay, I'm going to have a good palm-sized selection of protein, and I'm going to choose a good one that looks delicious to me, but that's, you know, solid protein, and I'm going to choose a starch, and I'm going to keep it to the size of my fist, and that's it. So I can pick a roll, or I can pick the mashed potatoes, or, you know, whatever looks the most exciting to me that I really want. But I'm going to have a visual image in my mind, this much I'm going to eat. And then I'm going to give myself carte blanche for any soups, for any vegetables, for any salads. So if I really want to feel like I'm having a lot, then I'm going to choose those things that are not, that are relatively low in calories. And then after you eat, when you've chewed, when you've slowed down, when you've eaten that first set, just give yourself at least 10 minutes, at least 10 minutes before you think about going up for dessert, going up for second helpings, and really concentrate on the company.
Yeah.
You know, concentrate on the company, chatting with the people that are around you, and really let yourself let go of the eating for a little while. I say either talk or eat. So if you're talking out loud, just leave the food alone. And if you're listening, you can chew, but, you know, focus on the people.
Right. I think it's very helpful, that 10-minute thing, because people forget this, that the cravings will pass, and hunger, it takes a while. There's actually a hormone called CCK that needs to get from the gut to the brain to say, hey, dude, you've eaten enough. And that takes a little bit of time to do. If you put that down for 10 minutes, I found that even telling yourself, look, I can go back and get a second. I'm not saying I can't.
Yep.
All I'm asking myself to do is wait 10 minutes before you do it.
And have a break. And then you don't trigger that deprivation thing, like, oh, I can't have it. You know, it's just, there's just some balance around it. Yeah.
And we are super, before we go, a fast tip is there something you can do you're so good at upgrading recipes, you know, at making them a little bit healthier than they might be, and still being able to indulge in some of the comfort foods. Any quick tips for that before we wrap up?
Well, my absolute favorite one, honestly, in nearly every baked recipe, nearly every one, you can take out 20 to 25% of the sugar with almost no effect at all.
Interesting. Michelle does that also. We found that I can't even taste the difference, really.
You can't taste it. And of course, you know, you don't want to go too low because it will affect the chemistry of it. But for the most part, you can always skim 10 or 15%, and you can usually get down to, you know, as much as a quarter of it. You can just dump it right out of the recipe. It's great.
That's great. Tell us about your program. We're going to do a link to it. I want everybody to know about you, Clean Food Coach. You've got something going on. Tell us real quick about it.
I do, yes. I mean, actually, it's perfect timing for this. It's called the Clean Food Reboot. And so if you want to, you know, indulge, have some fun over the holidays, if you check out this program, you'll be able to step right into much healthier eating right away. And it's a 4-week menu plan. It's totally done for you. It's laid out. It's got beautiful shopping lists. Pays for itself. It's actually super cheap, but it pays for itself because there's not a single wasted carrot stick. I mean, literally, you eat everything you buy.
And the rest carrot stick, that's for sure.
It's 15 minutes or less for the meals. So your prep, you are going to spend some time in the kitchen, but you're loading up on vegetables. You're balancing your blood sugar. Your energy is going to return. It's going to detox you. You know, if you had some gluten exposure, if that doesn't work for you, or you ate too many grains, it'll just take you right back to balance like that. So it's really a terrific program.
Thank you so much. It's such a joy to talk to you all the time. Do you want to say goodbye to the dogs? I'm going to